Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. This is where we sort of skip the textbook approach and go straight for the good stuff, like cosmic eavesdropping.
That's a great way to put it. Forget dry lectures.
Exactly. Today, we're cracking open a file that's just packed with, well, personal drama, some surprisingly sharp philosophy, and honestly, enough humor to remind you that even powerful entities can have, let's call it a diva moment.
Oh, definitely. And our source material today is absolutely spectacular. We're looking at session 26 of the early sessions, book 1 of Seth material.
Right?
And this was recorded on a Tuesday, February 18th, 1964. But the key thing here, it was totally unexpected.
Unscheduled.
Completely. And that's critical because it really gives us a glimpse of Seth, well, maybe under a bit of pressure. And it leads to some seriously profound, even challenging ideas about reality and the human ego.
Okay, so our mission today really is to unpack this session. It's super high energy, kind of intense. We're hunting for those key insights, those surprising facts.
Yeah, the stuff that makes you go, huh?
Right. The funny bits, maybe the slightly rude bits from Seth, and the concepts that are just absolutely groundbreaking, all delivered in, a relaxed, conversational, maybe even slightly chilling atmosphere.
Perfect. But before we dive in, we absolutely have to give credit where it's due.
Oh, wait.
This comes from the incredible body of work known as the Seth material, and the publisher is the New Awareness Network.
And just so everyone knows, this deep dive, like all of them, is put out completely free of charge.
Yep. On all the major platforms, it's purely for educational purposes.
Okay, let's kick off with the drama.
Mm.
Because the context for session 26 is, well, it's everything, like you said, totally unscheduled.
Right. Joseph, who recorded everything, and Jane, who channeled Seth, or Ruburt, as Seth called her, they weren't expecting to work that night at all.
It wasn't like a planned, deep philosophical discussion night. It was just Tuesday.
Exactly. Joseph had actually just had a back treatment, felt better, and they were winding down, maybe sipping some wine, having a snack. Totally casual. The session they were expecting was the next day, Wednesday, and they had a friend over, John Bradley.
Ah, the witness.
Yes, the witness. He was a drug salesman, and he'd actually been present for session 21 before, so they're just hanging out, chatting about Seth, about the sessions themselves.
So they're literally talking about Seth.
When Jane starts getting those, those energetic nudges, Seth is basically knocking on the door, saying, okay, I'm here, let's do this.
And Joseph, what does he do?
Well, Joseph, maybe feeling a bit protective of Jane, as he often did.
Or maybe just tired. It was late.
Could be. He decides to veto it. He actually says out loud that they'll wait for the regular time, Wednesday. He mentioned the late hour and worried Jane might get overly tired.
Uh-oh. Big mistake.
Huge mistake. This is where the sparks fly. You see Seth's really formidable personality just crash right into these very human physical limitations.
So what happened? Jane felt it immediately.
Instantly. Jane tells Joseph urgently that his statement just made Seth boiling mad.
Boiling mad. Wow.
Yeah. So you've got this incredibly powerful, non-physical intelligence, right? Capable of discussing the very structure of the cosmos.
And he's furious because a human decided his channel needed a good night's sleep.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? The cosmic schedule apparently did not appreciate the human intervention.
So Joseph had to scramble.
Pretty much. He had to grab his notebook, pen, everything. Jane insisted they start right then and there with John Bradley as the witness.
It really shows that Seth, even though he's often funny and guiding, he operates on a completely different level of urgency, different expectations.
Totally different. And when Seth finally does come through, his opening lines, pure theater.
Really sets the stage.
Oh, yeah. He acknowledges he came uninvited, but then pivots hard onto Joseph's lack of manners.
His quote is amazing, isn't it?
It really is. He says something like, I came uninvited, I know, but you are polite to your guest, and I recognize his presence. You are not, however, as polite with me.
Wow. He's basically saying, you respected your human friend's time, but not mine, the entity actually providing the material. It's asserting a kind of equality, or maybe even superiority.
It feels like that, doesn't it? It's delivered with such drama. Then he welcomes John Bradley, the witness.
But even that has a twist.
Right. He tells Joseph and Ruburt that John's presence is for their own edification. Like maybe they need a witness to keep them honest after trying to skip the session.
Huh. And then he throws in that line about Jane, Ruburt.
Classic Seth. He adds that having the witness there should do my nervous pigeon Ruburt some good.
Nervous pigeon.
It's his nickname for her. It's like he's comforting Jane, acknowledging her state, while simultaneously taking a little dig at Joseph for trying to control things. It just perfectly sets the tension for the rest of the session. Playful, but definitely stern.
Okay, so despite that really dramatic entrance,
Yeah.
Fueled by cosmic anger.
Right, the diva moment.
Yeah. The session actually pivots pretty quickly to some deep intellectual stuff.
Yeah.
And it was prompted by John Bradley, the witness, asking about evolution.
That's the genius of Seth, isn't it? He takes this immediate personal grievance about being restrained and connects it right into this massive philosophical critique of how humanity sees itself.
So John asks about evolution, and Seth just jumps on it.
Immediately, he challenges the whole idea that evolution is just about the human species. He calls that focus, that human-centric view, an expression of dualism.
Okay, let's pause on dualism. For Seth, that seems to be like the original sin of philosophy, right?
Yeah.
How does us versus them apply to evolution?
Well, dualism here is that false separation. Mind versus matter, spirit versus body, or in this case, conscious versus inert. We draw this line in the sand and say, okay, everything on this side, humans, maybe some animals, is alive and conscious.
And everything on that side, rocks, plants, early organisms, is just dead matter or only reactive.
Exactly, and Seth just throws that line out completely. He states very clearly that consciousness exists in all things on the physical plane, even in what we dismissively call so-called inert form.
Wow. Okay, that flips everything. If a rock has consciousness, then this whole human quest to achieve consciousness is, well, it's looking in the wrong direction.
Precisely. It means we weren't ever searching for consciousness itself. We were just developing a specific type of conscious expression, a particular way of manifesting it.
So we didn't gain it, we just specialized.
Kind of, yeah. And rejecting that idea of inert objects leads him right into attacking the notion that self-consciousness had some set-in entry point, like a magic moment.
He uses that great image, doesn't he? No sound of trumpets.
Exactly. Entered, so to speak, with the sound of trumpets. It directly counters that sort of religious or even self-congratulatory scientific view that humanity had this sudden, almost divine breakthrough into self-awareness.
Seth is just like, nope, no fanfare needed. It was always there.
Consciousness was inherent from the very first physical materialization, he argues, regardless of how simple it looked. And self-consciousness, just the basic ability of one unit of consciousness to know it's separate from another, followed pretty quickly.
And this is the key part, not necessarily human self-consciousness.
Right. That's where his humor gets a bit sharp. He calls the belief that self-consciousness must involve humans a supreme egotistical presumption.
Ouch. So why do we think only our brand of self-awareness is the real deal?
He uses really simple, clear examples. A tree is conscious of itself as a tree. It knows it's rooted, it's not flying around. A dog knows it's not a cat.
They're self-conscious on their own terms, experiencing their reality.
Fully. Our mistake, Seth says, is reserving the label self-conscious just for the human thinking ego, which is only one way, one expression out of countless possibilities.
Okay, so if the tree and the dog already have self-consciousness in their own way, where does human consciousness fit in? What was our big developmental step? And this brings us back to that incredible line. The human conception was alive in the fish.
That line just shatters the standard linear fossil record view of evolution, doesn't it? Seth explains that, yeah, the biological complexity needed for our kind of conceptual, abstract self-awareness came much later.
But the blueprint for it,
Yeah.
the idea of it,
was already present, way earlier. He says human consciousness started forming with multicellular groups that reached a certain level of complexity. But the conception, alive in the fish.
So the potential for humanity wasn't sparked in a cave somewhere or on the African savanna. It was a psychic pattern, active way back in the primordial soup.
That's the idea. And this hinges on these core Seth concepts, mental genes and inner time.
Okay, mental genes, what are those exactly? Like psychic DNA?
Pretty much. He calls them psychic blueprints for physical matter. They're non-physical organizing patterns. And crucially, they contain the pattern for human-type self-consciousness right from the very beginning of physical reality.
Whoa. Okay, that needs unpacking. We think of time as, past, present, future, a straight line. What's this inner time where these blueprints supposedly exist?
Inner time, according to Seth, exists outside that clock time. It's more like a dimension of pure concept, of probability, of psychological reality. It's the dimension where the pattern for human consciousness was already fully formed and complete, long before it ever showed up physically.
So the structure was perfect in psychological time, in inner time.
long before it got built, piece by piece, in the physical world, which he sort of dismissively calls the camouflage patterns.
Camouflage patterns, we'll have to come back to that. But this totally reframes evolution then. It's not just random mutations and survival of the fittest stumbling towards awareness.
No, in this view, it's more like the methodical, almost inevitable physical construction of a pre-existing, perfected psychic pattern. That fish's biology, its complexity, just provided the right housing for those early mental genes that would eventually need a human form to fully express themselves physically.
Mind blown. So evolution is more like 3D printing a pre-designed file.
That's not a bad analogy, actually. And the process is guided, he suggests, by something called mental enzymes.
Not like digestive enzymes, I assume.
No. These seem to be non-physical mechanisms. Their job is to translate the non-physical blueprint, the thought data, into physical form. They're constantly imprinting the psychological reality onto physical matter, translating inner time reality into our linear physical time reality.
Okay, so after that incredibly dense philosophical download about evolution and mental genes.
Which must have left John Bradley's head spinning.
Right. Seth actually suggested a break. It was, what, around 10:57 p.m.?
And when they came back, we get this really cool real-time confirmation of Seth's abilities.
The telepathy thing.
Exactly. John Bradley, the witness, reported that while Seth had been speaking before the break, he started answering the questions John was just thinking of right as they popped into his head.
Wow. So direct mind reading happening right there in the room. John must have been floored.
Totally. Perfect. Unbiased confirmation. And Seth, when he resumes at 11:05 p.m., he doesn't miss a beat. He jumps right in by addressing the thought John just had about how to address him, Seth.
And then he drops the name, Philip. That's John's entity name.
It's this fantastic mix, isn't it? Deep philosophy 1 minute, then suddenly it's cosmic gossip time. Seth tells John he considers him an old friend, and actually admits he loves astounding the present personalities of acquaintances with past life stuff.
He even calls it a failing of mine, but I enjoy it. Like, yeah, I know I shouldn't show off, but it's fun.
Totally. So he just starts rattling off Philip's highlights reel.
Twice a woman.
Once some more of considerable stature.
And that personality in Boston they'd apparently mentioned before.
Right. And then comes the first classic Seth jab, aimed at John himself, delivered with that signature dry wit.
The gout warning.
Yeah. He playfully warns John about a predisposition to gout because, as Seth puts it, he has been lecherous in your way.
Huh. So past life tendencies carrying over, even physically.
Seems to imply that, yeah, certain personality patterns persist even if they show up differently. And apparently Joseph, the recorder, found this pretty funny and asked if it applied to him too.
Bad move, Joseph. Never ask Seth if you're open to criticism.
Exactly. Seth immediately turns that sharp wit back on him. Just a moment of friendly but definitely pointed mockery.
What did he say about Joseph?
He basically accused Joseph of overcompensating now for past, shall I say, fleshiness by a most unnecessary aesthetic and self-punishing attitude.
Whoa. So seeing Joseph's current discipline and artistic focus as like an overreaction to past indulgence, driven by ego, not real balance.
That's a heavy psychological insight dropped in the middle of past life talk, isn't it? But the most detailed and honestly the most entertaining bit of gossip is the story of Yolanda Schravenstatter.
And he spells out the name. Schravanstatter, just to be clear.
Making sure Joseph gets it right in the notes. So this was Philip as Yolanda living in Belgium in 1632.
And the story's pretty dramatic.
Very. Yolanda gets caught in some kind of indiscretion, so he doesn't specify what, and gets severely beaten by her husband.
Who Seth describes as
a pig-headed husband who had a snout to match. Seth never resists a colorful description.
Never. But the really important part is what Yolanda did next.
Right. Against all the norms for a woman back then, she actually took the husband to a village trial, which Seth confirms was a particularly unusual occurrence at that time.
Shows incredible strength. Maybe that Philip entity has a persistent sense of justice or something.
Could be. And then comes the punchline. The perfect piece of dramatic irony that connects it all.
This is the best part.
Seth reveals that John Bradley Phillip in his current life is familiar with this very same pig-headed husband from 1632 through a business relationship.
No! Get out! Can you imagine that? You're trying to sell pharmaceuticals or whatever to the reincarnation of the guy who beat you up centuries ago?
It's incredible, right? It hammers home that idea that our current relationships, even the professional ones, might be these really deep karmic connections playing out across lifetimes.
Wild. So after all that juicy gossip,
Seth brings it back. He pivots back to the big picture, back to evolution, clearly still a bit impatient with the human-centric view. And he uses that powerful metaphor.
Humanity's supreme blossom,
Yeah.
the ego.
Is, at times, a poisoning blossom indeed.
Okay, poisoning. Why poisoning? What does the ego do that's so bad, according to Seth?
Well, the ego is essential, right, for navigating the physical world. But according to Seth, humanity became so fascinated by it, so consumed by the conscious thinking self.
That we completely ignored the source.
Exactly. Ignored the stronger and more vivid self, the inner self, the entity that actually made the ego possible in the first place. The ego became the main event instead of just being a tool for experience.
So it's poisoning because it tricks us into thinking it's all there is.
Yeah.
That this conscious thinking mind is the totality of our existence.
Yeah. And by focusing all our energy there, we essentially cut ourselves off from the non-physical source, the inner self, where the real power lies, the mental genes, the reliable inner data. It limits our potential just to this 3D world, this camouflage. And that leads us right into maybe the biggest philosophical bombshell of the whole session, the ultimate takedown of sensory reality.
This is where Seth basically says our fundamental tools for understanding the world are, well, flawed.
Deeply flawed. It's this central conflict he sets up. The inner senses versus the outer senses. We're all taught, trust what you see, what you touch, what you can measure.
Seeing is believing.
Right. And Seth just flips that entire hierarchy upside down.
So the inner senses were always primary.
Always paramount, he argues. They were the impetus behind the physical formations. They use those mental enzymes we talked about to imprint the non-physical data onto physical matter. Your inner data, your thoughts, emotions, psychological experiences, that's vivid, immediate, reliable, that's the source reality.
Okay, but if inner data is so reliable, why don't we trust it more? Why are we so skeptical of things like intuition or telepathy?
Because, Seth says, thanks to this supreme ego, we've developed this critical flaw. We demand double evidence.
Double evidence, what does that mean?
Think about psychological experience, like deep grief over losing a friend. We accept that exists, right? We know it's real, even though you can't put it on a scale or measure its chemical composition or hold it in your hand.
Right. We grant it reality just because we feel it intensely.
Exactly. But when we encounter other inner experiences, maybe telepathy, a premonition, a moment of clairvoyance, things that are arguably less abstract than grief,
we immediately demand physical proof. We want it measured, documented, repeated in a lab.
We insist on translating it into the terms of the alien outside senses. We demand that this inner data somehow show up for our eyes or ears or touch sensors.
He asks that great question, doesn't he? Why insist on feeling or touching a premonition when you don't demand to hold happiness in your hand?
It's a brilliant point. We're forcing valid, reliable inner data into a framework, the physical senses, that is fundamentally not equipped to perceive it directly.
And if the outer senses aren't even equipped to handle inner data, are they even accurately reporting the physical world?
Ah, now you're getting to the real punchline of session 26. Seth's answer is a resounding no.
This is the big one. Your senses lie.
Bam, right there. He challenges the most fundamental assumption we have about reality, that our senses give us an accurate picture.
He uses the table example, right? The classic symbol of solid reality.
Perfect example. Science itself tells us this table isn't actually solid. It's mostly empty space, filled with vibrating atoms and molecules, energy moving at incredible speeds.
But my eyes see it as solid. My hand feels it as solid, stable, unmoving.
Exactly. Your senses are giving you a fundamentally inaccurate report of the physical reality they claim to describe.
So Seth just says, face up to it, my dear lovelies. Your senses lie.
Love that, my dear lovelies. He says the outer senses are just perceptors of camouflage physical world, a world created automatically by the inner self.
Okay, hang on. Camouflage.
Yeah.
If the physical world is just camouflage, why did the inner self bother creating it? Why create a lie, basically? What's the point of this perceptual trick?
Well, the camouflage serves a really crucial purpose.
Focus.
And stability, shared stability.
Meaning?
If we actually perceive reality as it truly is, all vibrating energy fields, shifting probabilities, constant atomic flux, we probably couldn't function. It would be overwhelming chaos. The camouflage creates a stable, agreed-upon reality, a consensual hallucination, if you like.
Yeah.
It's solid enough, stable enough to allow us to have structured experiences, to interact, to develop that ego within a manageable framework. It's like a necessary training ground.
So the senses aren't lying maliciously. They're just providing the user interface for this specific level of reality, making the shared game feel solid so we can play it effectively.
That's a great way to think about it. They're the perfect tools for this limited, structured environment. They process the graphics and make them feel real, even though the solidity is just a perceptual construct.
So we're creating this environment.
Seth clarifies that. We automatically and unselfconsciously create our personal physical environment, like how your breath makes steam on cold glass. It's a natural output of your being. But, he stresses, that doesn't mean we create all that is.
Right. We create our slice, our perception, which then interacts with the larger shared camouflage reality that other entities are also projecting and perceiving.
Exactly. The limitations usually come from our conscious focus, and especially from our deep-seated belief that this camouflage is the total reality.
Wow. Okay, so that whole discussion about lying senses and the camouflage world, that basically wrapped up the main philosophical part of this session, right? It ended around midnight.
Yeah, the formal Q&A part. But the night wasn't over yet. Joseph, apparently still a bit stung by being called impolite by Seth.
Can't blame him.
He kept complaining about it, half humorously, Seth notes later, and this actually prompted another brief, spontaneous, totally unscheduled follow-up.
After John Bradley had already left?
Yeah, way later, like 1:35 a.m., Jane just started dictating again. And this part is maybe the most tender, the most revealing about the actual personal relationship between Seth, Jane, and Joseph.
The tone shifts completely.
Dramatically. It seems Seth realized his initial outburst, his anger, had maybe hit Joseph harder than intended. He didn't want to leave Joseph feeling judged or inadequate.
So what did he do? He actually apologized.
He did, which is pretty rare for Seth. He says, point blank, I should have known better, and for once you have my apology.
Wow. That's huge. It really shows it's not just a teacher-student thing. It's much deeper, more personal.
Absolutely. And he even explains why he was so harsh. He admits to being emotionally more involved with Joseph, specifically mentioning past instances.
Suggesting a pattern, like we judge the people closest to us more severely because their actions matter more to us.
That seems to be the implication. He reassures Joseph, I do not mean to push you too hard, and I certainly do not mean to make you feel inadequate. Your performance is actually very near excellent. It's this really remarkable moment of, cosmic making up.
That's amazing. Did he say anything else personal?
Yeah, he also confirms his sort of protective role. He promises to help Joseph gain freedom from the negative influences of his current parents, or at least their psychological hold on him, but without hurting them.
So working on Joseph's psychological stuff non-physically.
Right. Showing that holistic view of Joseph's life struggles. And then, of course, Seth, being Seth, he can't leave without one last little joke, a friendly dig.
Aimed at Jane Ruburt this time.
Yep. He refers to her as towering strength Ruburt.
Which sounds nice.
But then immediately undercuts it with, for a weaker tower of strength I have never seen.
Classic. A perfect little acknowledgement of her fragility mixed with her incredible spiritual role.
Exactly. So that session finally officially ends around 1:43 a.m. But wait, there's one more little bit.
Still more?
Just a couple of brief notes Jane received from Seth while she was lying in bed, apparently incomplete, but one of them introduces another really mind-bending concept. Condensed time.
Okay, condensed time. What's the idea there?
The note basically explained that a whole human lifetime, say 70 or 80 years for an incarnated personality like Joseph or Jane, is experienced as just a split second from the perspective of the entity level where Seth exists.
A whole life in a split second.
Yep.
That just completely reframes everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mortality, urgency, the dramas we go through.
If our entire life, with all its ups and downs, joys and sorrows, is just an instantaneous flash for our larger self, our entity, how do they even perceive our day-to-day anxiety, our ambitions, our suffering?
It suggests the main point of our linear life isn't really the duration. It's the intensity, the density of experience that gets packed into that tiny moment of physical existence.
Yeah.
Our lives are like super compressed, high-intensity training modules.
So the perceived stakes are just radically different from Seth's viewpoint versus ours.
Totally. And if you take that further, maybe the entity, the larger self, is running dozens, maybe hundreds of these split-second lives simultaneously or sequentially, just gathering data, gathering experience. Our 70-year drama is just one frame in a massive multi-dimensional movie.
Which makes Joseph trying to postpone the session so Jane could get some rest. Even funnier from Seth's perspective. Why worry about a few hours of sleep when the whole lifetime is just a blink anyway? Exactly. And that ties right back to the very, very last note Seth left. Just a little joke for Joseph,
What was it?
basically. Just because I apologize, don't you get a big head?
Perfect. Drama over, lesson learned, friendship still intact, hashtag tag outro. Wow, that was quite a ride. The session 26 really delivered. We started with Seth being furious about a missed appointment,
The diva moment.
and we ended with him apologizing and casually dropping revelations about the nature of time itself.
The key takeaways are just huge, aren't they? First, that whole idea that the human conception was alive in the fish just completely demolishes that egotistical view that consciousness somehow belongs to us.
Right. And then the big one, the foundation of our reality, what we see and touch, is actually a camouflaged physical world.
And maybe the most chilling part of that, our senses lie. That table you might be leaning on right now, the chair you're sitting on, the floor beneath you, is not solid in the way you think it is.
It's a reliable representation, yes, but fundamentally inaccurate, designed by our inner self for focus, not for ultimate truth.
So we want to leave you with a final thought to chew on, really building on that idea of the camouflage world and the condensed time.
Okay, let's hear it.
If your entire 70 or 80-year life is just a split second of intense experience designed by your inner self, and your outer senses are only showing you a stable facade, a camouflage, then how much of your perceived limitations right now, maybe it's financial struggles, maybe health issues, maybe that deep belief that you just can't achieve something, how much of that is just part of the automatic, unself-consciously created camouflage? Patterns you've just accepted as solid reality, but maybe haven't tried to consciously edit or see through.
Oof, that's that's something profound to really sit with until our next deep dive.
Definitely. And if this has piqued your interest, we really, really encourage you to explore this material more deeply. Reading the Seth material books yourself is the best way to grasp the true depth of these ideas.
Absolutely. Where can people find more?
You can find more info, lots of resources, and crucially, copies of the Early Sessions books by visiting the New Awareness Network website and their bookstore. The address is sethcenter.com, the Early Sessions.
Great. And just a reminder, this deep dive is totally free, distributed on all major platforms purely for educational purposes.
We hope you found it as fascinating as we do.
We'll see you next time as we continue pulling threads from this incredible tapestry woven by Seth, Ruburt, and Joseph. Join us then.